Ni hao annyeong. Hello, I'm the Dark Fae, and welcome back to another session of Confessions of a First-Time Dungeon Master. As always, if you missed the last session, I'll put a link to it up in the corner for you over here. You can go check it out, catch up on what you missed, then come back here to find out what happened next. We are now on session 52, so let's begin. Yes, I have a d20 ring. Okay, so this session was one of those sessions where I sort of question the thinking behind almost every decision that my party makes. So they're in this chamber with this large pit and have kind of scouted down into like the room beneath that they're trying to get to, which they believe contains the orb. Like, that scouting, like, they didn't see everything necessarily in there, but I think they should have gotten the sense that it was kind of an enclosed space. But it was a lot of discussion, obviously, about how to get down this 120-foot pit with like another 60-foot drop down below. And like at the end of the session, I even like outlined some suggestions or thoughts that I had that they could potentially utilize to get down there. Because I didn't have a map for this because there was no way that I could really make a very accurate map, given that it's more than just like a 2D like situation that they're dealing with. They like did not understand the way the pit was or worked, so I kind of had to explain multiple times. So it's a 50-foot diameter pit, and there's literally just like thousands of ice spikes that are just protruding out of it. Some large, some small, all jagged, all sharp, some that basically like like go through or cover like the entire opening. So it's not like a sarlacc pit where it's like open and there's only teeth on like the edges of the opening. It's literally like if I made a pile of like different sized needles and just like threw them into a jar. That's kind of what they're working with. So a lot of discussion on whether they can like tie ropes and like climb down, and I just had to make it very clear that for medium-sized creatures that they all are, it's going to be really difficult to find gaps and like a space where they can like squeeze through, and that if they do try, they're probably going to get somewhat shredded on the way down. So originally, this is kind of in line with the spike growth spell, which if you're not familiar with it, I'll put it up. Spike growth is like a ranger or druid spell, and only level 2, and generally it creates like this radius of spikes that every time you move 5 feet, you take 2d4 damage. Well, because this pit is so large, it's 2d4 for every 10 feet they move, essentially, if they just decide to drop down, which would actually kind of, like on average, do like 50-ish damage. Not good for anyone. So I'm like, please don't just hop down. Like, they were talking about if there were like larger spikes that they could potentially stand on or like a climb to. I'm like, technically, I mean, yes, sure, you could try, but that doesn't negate the fact that you're going to get poked and pierced and impaled potentially by all the other spikes that are kind of just crisscrossing and growing out of other spikes, etc. So after some very long deliberation, Puck suggests that he summon a barlgura and just drop it down the hole to A, see what happens, and B, maybe make like a channel, like have the barlgura basically be fodder for all the spikes and like break a like a path for them through this tunnel, which is a good idea. It's one of the things that like I even suggested at the end of the last video. So looking it up, in D&D, about barlgura weighs about 650 pounds, I think. Definitely having enough to break through most, if not all, of the spikes there. Maybe some of the bigger ones, like depending on momentum and like, you know, maybe they won't break, you slam into them, but either way, there aren't that many of those. So after more deliberation, they agree to have Puck summon the barlgura, and like I'm very specific as to asking like where he wants to summon, or like he's actually specific in his own casting. I didn't really have to ask. So he summons it 60 feet up over the middle of the pit. Okay. So the barlgura is summoned, and Puck instructs it to basically do a cannonball into this giant pit of spikes. I roll 24d4 for it. I think it does like 51 or something damage. Just below, or something just below like the barlgura's HP. Might have done like 60 at some point. And so I basically mentioned that all they hear is a lot of ice shattering, cracking, like unpleasant, like demonic screams of pain, and after a few seconds, as it gets fainter and fainter, a very like low thud, at which case Puck no longer feels the magic connecting him to the barlgura because it has died from the combination of being shredded and the fall, the 60-foot fall. So, there's now like a rough like path or channel like through the center of the pit, which they could pretty safely climb down. It's not like perfect, since a barlgura like through this field is not going to just fall perfectly, especially hitting into some of the larger. So you kind of like it's like ping-ponging a little bit down the center. It's a much easier climb. Still maybe a little bit hazardous, so that I reduced the damage considerably. But it's in the middle of the so like 25 feet away from where they're standing, so they don't really have a good vantage point to see in, because they have to look 25 feet like across, and then they don't have the angle to see downward. So then I don't know, they're still debating on whether they can just climb down. They go back to like debating if they can just climb down normally, like using a rope secured to the edge and then just like climbing down the edge. And so I once again have to be like, you can certainly try, but with the spikes that are in this pit, like, you will not avoid taking damage. And then in which case I had to draw them like a shitty diagram of like a circle with just like a million triangles in it, just to like show how spiky this pit is. And then they like finally understood. So then it shifted to whether or not they could make it to the hole in the middle. And like they were onto something kind of with using the rope of climbing to either like thread across the pit and then they kind of move across it to go to the center. But in the end, it kind of turned into like Terrell was like making a harness, and then he like wanted to have the rope of climbing like move towards like one of the thicker icicles in the middle and tie around. Like, that's possible, but that icicle is like 10 feet down in this pit where there are still spikes covering it. So like you can certainly try to jump down to that icicle, but you will take damage. So once they understood that they cannot really move through the pit without getting stabbed by an icicle, unless they somehow got to like the center, they started giving up. They were all like, well, there must be a different way. There is like, yes, the tingle has been leading us this direction, but there's windy tunnels. There must be a different path that's easier than going through a pit. So then they all kind of vote to head back up the slope that they had so arduously tried to climb down before, and now arduously climb back up. And this is where, as DM, I'm kind of like, I don't want to railroad you, but if you're trying to go for the orb, this is literally the only way. Your bat familiar kind of discovered that it was an enclosed chamber, but with a natural 1 in perception, I guess you can't know that for sure. B, both Basil and Ivar have gotten very strong tingle pulls that they need to go downwards, like directly into this pit. C, that corresponds with the imagery from their dream, which, yes, it's a dream, but when they have these possession dreams, they have meaning, you know? And then, I don't know. So they decide to reuse the rope of climbing to start, like, going back up. Like, there's been a few pitons that have been left in the tunnel, so they kind of use it to tie to one, climb up, and then it just kind of like snake upwards. So I only have them roll like 1 or 2 checks. They're fine, minus Basil rolling a 1 once, so he kind of slides down, takes a little bit of damage, but nothing too terrible. And then they all make it back out to where like that initial fork was, where they got attacked by cloakers. So I'm like, as DM, I don't want to be like, to reveal to them like, no, there's no other way, like you go to the pit or you don't. So I kind of just like wait a little bit to see like how much speculation they do and how many questions they ask. They don't ask enough questions. And eventually, after exploring some more, finding a few tunnels that they hadn't gone through that would either lead them away from that pit room or just right back to it eventually, Basil consults his ring, actually kind of like beseeching it for help. So I have him roll, instead of like the usual perception check for the tingle, I have him roll persuasion to see if whoever resides in that ring is actually listening and will help them, because currently the interests do align. So he rolls like a 23 or something, which is very good. So he actually gets a message, a voice that kind of just whispers, "Follow it down." And with that, he kind of gets imagery back from kind of his dream of a large pit. So from that, he deduces that yes, the pit is probably the only way to get there, and reasons correctly, thankfully, because I didn't want to say it, that these orbs are meant to be difficult to find. Like, they're not supposed to just be in places where anyone can get to them. So of course it's going to be guarded by really like difficult and like deterring stuff. So then after, I'm not going to say wasting time, but exploring their non-existent maybe options, they go back. So this time I don't make them go through the whole ordeal of like going down that slope, which is easy enough. They've done it twice now. So they make it back to the pit, and the thing that they come up with is that Puck drop another barlgura, but this time closer to the edge. Just like, if you had just done that in the first place, it would have been a lot easier. So for the second time, a giant barlgura summons 60 feet above this pit and drops with a lot of crashing and screaming again, and another thud. And now, with the barlgura dead, there is like a rough path downward that they can, tie all the ropes together, drop it through, and then climb down. So, with the climb, I have them all make an athletics check and also just a dexterity saving throw to see if they can kind of avoid some of the trickier parts where a barlgura might have like hit into a larger spike and then like kind of changed course because it's not just a straight drop down. So they kind of follow this sort of channel. A few of them take a little bit of damage. It's kind of a combination check where the DC of their dex save was kind of determined by how well or how poorly they rolled on their athletics. So they rolled high enough combination, they either took half damage or no damage, or some took like a solid 6d4, 12d4. But anyways, eventually they don't all make it down because first down is Beverin with the rope, and he, once he makes it down like the 120-foot pit, he kind of hangs there to wait for the others. So he's like 60 foot above kind of the floor of the next cavern, the orb cavern. So it would generally take about 2 rounds for them to climb all the way down, probably more if I'm honest, but because of what happened next, I was nice about it. But so Basil then is next to climb down. He makes it down that 120 feet, hangs out with Bevan for a bit at 60. And then it's Puck's turn. And as Puck is climbing down, Basil decides that he should be the one to go first into the chamber before anyone else. From their experience with the last orb, they should know that the orb kind of triggers when there is a living presence near the orb or in its, enclosed room, its seal. So as soon as Basil steps foot in the chamber, with only half of their party kind of hanging 60 feet above them, that's when the orb activates and the frozen guardian appears. So now we roll initiative because it's programmed to attack things that enter its chamber on sight. Half the party is not here, so ordinarily it would have taken like 2 rounds or more per party member because they've been going like one by one. So I sped it up a little bit and just said that depending on whatever order they decide to go, they will basically reach that 60-foot level, like at the end of each subsequent round. So, combat ensues with half the party there. Basil drops down first. His turn is actually first as well. He doesn't really start fighting, but he kind of just starts bluffing his way. Like he's yelling basically at the guardian, brandishing his ring to let him pass to the orb, which is not how the orbs work. I think we even clarified it at the end of the session, that you have to, they should know from the last time that beating the guardian is what broke the orb. So I don't know if he's trying to die again, because this is literally exactly the same thing that happened the first time when they faced the drowned guardian. And Basil was literally knocked out in the first round. But luckily that didn't happen. But Puck basically what he tries to do is stay up at this 60-foot level and cast spells from there, which, I mean, you don't really have your hands free when you're clutching onto a rope. like, yeah, you can maybe take one hand off and cast, but you still, like, if the spell is somatic, you still have to do, like, the hand motions, like, technically and such, which is hard to do when trying to grab a rope. So there's that. And then Bavarin on his turn eventually does make it down. So now it's this weird case where, honestly, the Guardian can just fire, like, basically the equivalent of, like, ice knives, the spell, which I'll put here, twice a turn at a distance. He doesn't get his bite attack since he's not in melee, but he also has an ice glide ability where he can just, like, meld into the ice and then, like, pop up wherever he wants, so that'll be interesting. Their actions have, like, all sprung because it took, like, 3-4 rounds for everyone to finally get down there. And as a result, Basil is looking hurt, and Bavarin is also looking hurt because those two have been the closest and on the front lines. But yeah, at least now everyone is in the, no, not quite, not everyone's in the chamber. Everyone's made it to the 60-foot level, but Basil is, no, sorry, Tyrell is still 30 feet up, and Ivar is 60 feet up, because he has just made it. So, there's that. And Puck, who was 60 feet up, so one of the rulings that I made was because he was attempting to, like, cast spells and such while hanging onto this rope, when he got hit by an attack by one of the ice spears, so I had him roll a strength check to see if he could maintain his grip while casting and also getting hit and, you know, trying to hang on, concentrate and hang on. So I have him roll a strength check. He rolls a 10. No, he rolls a 9. So basically I rule that he ends up falling. I have him roll a dex save or acrobatics to try and, like, mitigate some of the fall damage. He rolls a 10. Ordinarily, that would be 66 fall damage. 6d6, not 66. But I think I was nice and made it like 3d6 or something. I don't know, but he took, I think, 17 points. I can't remember. But he took a chunk of fall damage and was prone, and then got caught in the freezing fog. That was the lair action that they put right underneath the rope. So he's going to take cold damage at the end of every turn until he can get out of it. He might be out of it already. But yeah, that's where we're at. We're in the middle of combat. It's kind of just starting for some people, and it's, like, pretty bad for others. They're all gonna die. They're all gonna die. I say this every time, but they're all gonna die. I hope they can surprise me, because Puck is also without both of his spells as a warlock. I think the rest of them are pretty decent. They've only used, like, a few. So we'll see how they deal with what the Frozen Guardian can throw at them. It'll be fun. Maybe. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for notifications when I put out new videos. I love you all, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.